Shalom. I'm going to start reading from First Maccabees here, verse 41. Then the king issued an edict to his whole kingdom that all of his subjects should become united, that each nation abandon its particular customs. All the Gentiles accepted the decree of the king, and many of the Israelites adopted his religion, sacrificing to idols and profaning the Sabbath. The king also sent messengers to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah with edicts commanding them to adopt practices that were foreign to their country, to prohibit the whole burnt offerings, the Holocaust, the sacrifices, the libations in the sanctuary, to profane the Sabbath and feast days, to defile the temple and its priests, to build altars, temples, and shrines for idols, to sacrifice swine and other unclean beasts, to leave their sons uncircumcised, and to allow themselves to defile with every kind of impurity and abomination, so they would forget the law and change all their observances. Anyone who refused to obey the command of the king was to be put to death. These were the terms of the edicts he issued throughout his kingdom. He appointed inspectors to supervise all the people, and he commanded all the towns of Judah to offer sacrifices town by town. Many of the people abandoning the law and joined them and committed evil deeds in the land, thereby driving Israel into hiding in every possible place of refuge. On the 15th day of the month of Kislev, in the year 145, the king erected upon the altar of holocausts the abomination that causes desolation. That's from Daniel. And many people, scholars, they can see through the fact that that chapter is written in Aramaic, that this author of Daniel was trying to write about this event. And why do you think they removed this book from the Christian Bible? And pagan altars were built in the surrounding towns of Judah. Incense was offered at the doors of the houses and then in the streets. Any scrolls of the law that were found were torn to pieces and destroyed by fire. If any people were discovered in possession of a book of the covenant or acting in conformity with the law, they were condemned to death by the decree of the king. And this is the same thing Catholicism did later on. Month after month, these wicked people used their power against any loyal Israelite found in the towns. On the 25th day of each month, they offered a sacrifice on the altar erected on top of the altar of holocausts. In accordance with the royal decree, any women who had their children circumcised were put to death. Galatians 5:2-4. Right? With their infants hung from their necks, also put to death were their families and those who had circumcised them. Despite all this, many in Israel stood firm and were resolved in their hearts not to eat any unclean food. They preferred to die rather than to be defiled by such food and profane the Holy Covenant. And they suffered death for their convictions. Great affliction was unleashed upon Israel. The one thing I wonder is, Abba Jehovah promises life in Deuteronomy 30. He promises life to those that obey his covenant. So were they really keeping covenant? Yes, they stood firm against these greater abominations, but they were afflicted. And Father only promises curses and affliction for those that are disobedient. This is the same thing I see in the nation of Israel today. If they were truly in covenant and not in a period of curses instead of blessing, no nation would attack Israel. It says that in Torah. See, in Deuteronomy 4:5, see, I have taught you statutes and judgments just as Jehovah my God commanded me, that you should do thus in the land where you are entering to possess it. You shall keep and do them, for that is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this is a great nation and a wise and understanding people. No nation says that of Israel. I mean, there's no people more hated today than the Jewish people. No nation says of them that this is a great nation and a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has a God so near to it as Jehovah, our God, whenever we call on him? Do they call on him for deliverance? No. Does America? I mean, look at the nation of America. How many of them believe they are in covenant? And yet, devastating storms strike the land. But yet they will say they have shalom in their heart. They are in covenant. And in North Carolina, in the hill country, I guarantee all these people were Christian, struck down, and never asking why. Why did God allow this affliction to strike me? Same thing the Maccabees should have asked. Father, if I'm obeying your covenant, why are you striking me down with affliction? But they didn't call on Jehovah, they called on the Judah of Maccabee, a man. And this isn't the only affliction coming. Oh, it's going to get really bad in this country because he's trying to get people to call on him. Port workers at East and Gulf Coast terminals steam toward a strike for the first time since 1977. It's gonna get real bad. Will people call on Jehovah, or will they turn to a man, Kamala, or Trump, to bring them salvation from this? And these are the tips of the iceberg. I believe it's going to get real bad. I hope that you've been listening to Father and preparing for the storms coming. In an interesting thing you'll notice as you follow Father and you pursue studying, it's John, there's this interesting contrast. In John 11:26, the man says, everyone who lives and believes in me will never die, ever, ever. But do you believe this? And Christians read this and they claim to believe it. They see continuous death around them. I mean, most Christian churches I see around this country, built in the 1850s to 1910s, like old buildings. You know what they have right next to their circus? A cemetery. Thousands of years. Everyone who lived and believed in him has died, has not risen. Either he's a liar or they didn't really believe in him. And I would say that the latter is probably not true. The more interesting thing, the really more interesting thing, is Genesis 3:4, when the serpent asks the woman to believe in him. And the serpent said to the woman, "You surely will not die." Now look at it, the contrast here. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. You surely will not die. I just find that fascinating, how similar those passages are. And, 1 Samuel 11, when Nahash, which means serpent, the Ammonite, which means fatherless one, came up and besieged Jabesh Gilead. Now, let's look at that, because every word matters. What does that mean? Dry, without water. And all the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, "Cut a covenant with us, and we will serve you." Go searching for your new covenant, because the Torah is insufficient. You need the Torah to become flesh. But Nahash the Ammonite said to them, "I will cut a covenant with you on this condition, that it will gouge out the right eye, always the right eye, of every one of you, unless I will make a reproach on all of Israel." Why the right eye? Why does he want our right eye? If your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you. If your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off and throw it from you. Why the right eye? Where then is the sense of blessing you had? For I testify to you that if possible, you would have plucked your eyes out for me and given them to me. I mean, did he fulfill the Tanakh by asking for our right eye, and Paul by saying we would have plucked out our eyes for him? It's weird. Silence is golden. I hope that, you know, we see affliction in our life and we don't act like the man in Deuteronomy 29, for you know, in Deuteronomy 29:16, for you know how we lived in the land of Mitzrayim, and how we came through the midst of the nations through which you passed. Moreover, you have seen their detestable things and their idols of wood, stone, silver, and gold, which they had with them. Unless there be any among you, a man or a woman, or a family, or tribe, whose heart turns away today from Jehovah, our God, to go serve the gods of those nations, lest there be among you a root bearing poisonous fruit and wormwood. This is an interesting word. Jeremiah talks about the wormwood as well. And it will be when he hears the words of this curse that he will bless himself in his heart, saying, I have peace, though I walk in the stubbornness of my heart, in order to sweep away the watered land with the dry. Remember what Jabesh Gilead means, the dry land. The land without the water of Jehovah is our heart without Torah. And we have declaring when affliction comes, and we know it's coming, it's going to get worse. Will we bless ourselves? Will we declare we have peace in affliction? I don't think we should. I think we should be crying out for repentance, for delay. Yet even now, says Jehovah, this is Joel 2:12, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. Rend your hearts and not your garments. Common practice, and we see this from David when he's told he's sinned against Jehovah as he tears his garments. Turn back to Jehovah, your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, rich in kindness, and always prepared to relent from punishing. Perhaps he will turn back and relent and leave a blessing behind him. Perhaps he will. 100 years ago, this nation was far more humble. But not today. Today we have celebrations of pride. And it's not just among those who don't believe in God. Most of the people who believe in God are very proud, believe they're right, refuse to hear the truth. And leave a blessing behind him, cereal offerings and libations to present it to Jehovah your God. Blow the trumpet in Zion and proclaim a fast. Announce a solemn assembly. Gather the people together and summon the community. Assemble the elders. Gather the children and even the infants at the breast. Call forth the bridegroom from his bedroom and the bride from her wedding chamber, and let the priests and the ministers of Jehovah stand weeping between the temple porch and the altar. I mean, he's telling you to really wear your grief and your humility outwardly. If we just have it inside of our heart where no one can see us, we're ashamed of our shame in a way, right? We're trying to hide it, and that's a form of pride. If you're trying to hide how afflicted you feel, because you don't want to be shamed by others. You're not afflicted to the fullest. You're not humble. You're proud. I mean, if you stand and say, I'm gonna hide my affliction. I'm gonna dress up like nothing's wrong. I'm gonna comb my hair this morning, put oil on my head, and when I fast, no one's gonna know I'm fasting because I'm gonna be the strongest faster there is. You're proud. You refuse to humble yourself. Don't be ashamed of weeping, of getting on your face and weeping. If necessary, cut the hair off your head to show that you're humbling yourself. As they say, spare your people, O Jehovah. Do not allow your heritage to be mocked and subject to the contempt of the nations. And isn't it interesting? Like, you don't see this in the Maccabees at all. Like, the message is completely shifted. And I talked about this with the video I did on Tabor, where he was talking about the book of Enoch. How the book of Enoch shifts the belief of what they foundationally put their rock in. No longer did they believe that this life was a blessing. They believed it was a curse. That life comes through death and death comes through life. Why should the people say, where is their God? Thereupon, Jehovah has stirred to feel concern for his land, and he took pity on his people. In response to their request, Jehovah said, I will send you grain and wine and oil, and you will have all you need. Never again will I expose you to the contempt of the nations. I shall drive the northern army from you and banish them to an arid and desolate land, with their vanguard toward the eastern sea and their rear guard toward the western sea. They will give off a stench, and a foul stench will rise up. Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for Jehovah has done great things. Be not afraid, you beasts of the field, for the open pastures are once again. The trees will bear fruit, and the fig tree and the vine will yield a full harvest. Yet the fig tree was barren, and because it was barren, he killed it. Perhaps he was sent to fulfill the curse for their disobedience. And I've thought about that. Like, what if he was sent as the sword to fulfill the curse? What am I talking about? Well, when David is caught in his sin, in 1 Samuel 12, sorry, 2 Samuel 12, that's the wrong context there. After Nathan the prophet is sent to David, and he tells him about the rich man had a great many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb, which he brought and nourished, and it grew up together with him and his children. And it would eat his morsel of bread and drink of his cup and lie in his bosom, and he was like a daughter to him. Now a visitor came to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take from his own flock or his own herd to prepare the traveler who had come to him. Rather, he took the poor man's ewe lamb, prepared it for the man who had come to him. And then David's anger burned greatly against the man, and he said to Nathan, As Jehovah lives, surely the man who has done this deserves to die. See, David understood righteous judgment, but he was blind to the fact that he was that man. He must make restitution for the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing and had no compassion. Nathan then said to David, "You are the man. And thus says Jehovah, the God of Israel, it is I who anointed you king over Israel. It is I who delivered you from the hand of Saul. I also gave your master's house and your master's wives into your care. I gave you the house of Israel and Judah, and had it been too little, I would have added many more things like these. Why have you despised the word of Jehovah by doing evil in his sight? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword, murdering him. And you have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the Ammons. Killed him. Murdered him. David murdered Uriah. There was no atonement for that. There's no amount of sacrifices that can atone for murder. So now the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me and taken the wife of Uriah to Hittite. This is so interesting. The sword will never depart from your house. In Matthew 10, what does he say? Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth, which means he's not Abar Shalom of Isaiah 9:6, which that man came to bring peace, that the world would never have war again. He says, do not think I've come to bring peace to the earth. And it's so interesting, they sing these songs about peace on earth, goodwill to men. But he says he's not come to bring that. I've not come to bring peace, but a sword. What is that? And how is it that people don't notice what's being said here? For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemies will be those of his own household. In Luke 12, it says the same thing. Do you think that I have come to give peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, in one house there will be 5 divided, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son and son against father, mother against daughter and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. That's really interesting. As in Micah 7, what does it say? Woe is me, for I have become as when the summer fruit has been gathered, as when the grapes have been gleaned. There is no cluster to eat, no first ripe to that my soul desires. The godly has perished from the earth, and there is no one upright among mankind. They all lie in wait for blood. Fascinating. And each hunts the other with a net. The fisher of men uses their net. Their hands are on what is evil, to do what is well. And the prince and the judge ask for a bribe, free grace. And the great man utters the evil desires of his soul, thus they weave it together. The best of them is like a briar, which he had on his head. The most upright of them a thorn hedge. The day of your watchman of your punishment has come. Now their confusion is at hand. Put no trust in a neighbor. Have no confidence in a friend. Guard the doors of your mouth, and from her who lies in your arms. For the son treats the father with contempt. The daughter rises up against the mother, the daughter-in-law against the mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own house. Isn't that what he just said? That he's come to fulfill the curse. But as for me, I will look to Jehovah. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. Look at Malachi 4. because they believe, you know, John is the Elijah, right? Before the great and awesome day, Elijah is supposed to come. But look what it says. For behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, when all the arrogant and all the evildoers will be stubble. The day that is coming shall set them ablaze, says Jehovah of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings. You shall go out leaping like calves from the stall, and you shall tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the sole of your feet. On the day when I act, says Jehovah of hosts, remember the Torah of my servant Moshe, the statutes and the rules I commanded him at Horeb for all Israel. Remember the Torah. If he's truly the servant of Jehovah, wouldn't that be reflected in the people who bear the anointed name? But they don't remember the law. They forsake it continually all day long. Behold, I will send for you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of Jehovah. So they think, hey, is John Elijah? And he says, yeah. But then in the synoptics, John says, I am not Elijah. So figure that out. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. Isn't that interesting? Like, you compare Micah 7 to Malachi 4, that Elijah was supposed to restore the fathers to the children. The mother-in-law would not be fighting against the daughter-in-law. But he says that he came to do that, which means he is not the fulfillment of the shalom coming, but of the destruction coming. And that's what happened. Israel was destroyed completely because of their pride. And now we have the same issue across the globe. The people still are not calling on the name. They're still not humbling themselves. They still turn to their idols of wood, stone, gold, and silver. That they still turn to men. And that could take all kinds of forms, like Acts 2:22, that man, or the men that are running for office. You turn to the Son of Man instead of the Creator who made the Son of Man. You turn to the one who promises destruction, division, and even Netanyahu, he's promising division for those that refuse to bend a knee to him. He brought out this map saying blessings and curses. If you make an accord with me, I'll give you blessings. If you don't, I'll bring you curses. That doesn't sound messianic. That sounds like the curse of dividing the brother against the sister, the father against the son. It's all this. We're just continually under this curse. And I asked this in the last video, like, where is the evidence that Israel ever kept Torah? Did they ever keep Torah? And the solution certainly isn't human sacrifice and theophagy. But what do we do? I think he's just looking for us to be humble. I really do. I think Father just wants us to realize we're not the creator. We're not perfect. What shall I come before Jehovah and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with a calf a year old? Will Jehovah be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul, the firstborn, as Paul called him, for the sin of your soul? He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does Jehovah require of you? To do Zedekah, righteousness. Do it. Be righteous. Love mercy. As Hosea says, like, mercy is greater than sacrifice. Walk humbly with your God. Like, I know, like, when I read this to my Christian family, they tell me this is hard. It's hard to do what's right. To be truly humble. To let people see your torn garments, your sackcloth and ashes. To not just wear it innerly, to hide your shame from the people around you. Wear it outwardly. Cover yourself in ashes and sackcloth. Call out to Jehovah alone. Will you do it with me? Will you cry out to Jehovah publicly with sackcloth and ashes, begging for mercy over this wicked people? Begging for Jehovah to restore his people to the land in real humility. Hallelujah.